In the current scenario of the COVID-19 pandemic, China is facing a global backlash due to its initial mismanagement of the COVID crisis. Many countries are now boycotting Chinese products. China is known for being the world's manufacturing superpower, and boycotting Chinese products is likely to have a significant impact on its global manufacturing space. China is a major exporter of raw material, machinery, consumer goods, etc., and global markets now, devoid of these products due to China's weakened global position, could be advantageous to India. We have Mr. Ashish Narayan, who is currently working for Asian Development Bank as principal economist and has previously worked for International Finance Corporation and World Bank, is here to express his views.
A warm welcome to Mr. Ashish Narayan. We have seen that China has transitioned from a rural agricultural economy to a manufacturing and service oriented economy. China is the largest agricultural and manufacturing economy in the world. Today, it is known as the world's factory because of its lack of regulatory compliance, strong business ecosystem, low tax and duties, and competitive currency practices. So, Mr. Narayan, you must be aware that China occupied a strong manufacturing position in the 1990s because of its economic reforms and policies. Now, India is facing similar challenges. So, should India try and replicate what China did in the 1990s? And how is the global environment and global value chains different now than what they were 30 years ago when China opened up?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let me say thank you for inviting me to talk to you. It's always a pleasure talking to people still in school, and I'm very glad to be talking about this very important topic at this point in time. So
Yes.
the question that you asked me, Anushri, is that is it important for India to do what China did, and is it possible for India to do what China did? The first point is that, of course, it's extremely important for India to do and try to link itself to global value chains. I mean, by global value chains, we mean the people and activities that are involved in producing a good and in marketing it. And most of these value chains spread across many countries. China has been very successfully able to utilize it. And if you, as you correctly mentioned, in the 1990s, uh, it's very surprising because if you look at the 1980s, slightly before the time period that you were mentioning, India had a slightly stronger industrial base. And if you look at the electronic sector, for example, in 1980, India had a stronger electronic sector than China did. But in that year, China decided, as a matter of policy, to open up its economy to foreign investors and get the things that it lacked, capital and technology. And they decided to link themselves into the global value chain, serving the important markets in the West. India, on the other hand, took a completely different perspective. They wanted to protect domestic industry, so they put up high tariff barriers and they've closed themselves off to foreign investment. What's the result? Well, 30 years later, China produces 10% or more of the global trade in electronics, whereas India, less than 1%. So I think if you want to create jobs and if you want to create good jobs, there is no option but to integrate with the world economy and to link yourself up to global value chains. Uh, at the same time, I think you're also right that in a way, it's harder for India to do this. Uh, After the global crisis or recession of 2008, and also now that we've seen the rise of new technology like automation and the Internet of Things, the comparative advantage of people is changing. In the 1990s, investors were looking for cheap places to locate and produce goods. They were looking primarily for cheap labor. That is no longer so true today. So, in a way, it's going to be very difficult for India to now get into the global value chains in a big way. The post-COVID world is also likely to be very different. Uh, the more stretched your value chains are across countries, the more vulnerable you are. And that is going to have an implication on how fast value chains grow and what India can do. But that said, I would still say that the opportunities are immense and it's important for India to get its game right. This does not mean that it's going to be easy. but it does not mean that it's going to be impossible. So with that, I hope I've answered your first question. Over to you. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely.
So we have to focus on balancing development of our local industries as well as follow globalization. So according to a study by Deloitte, India is expected to jump 6 ranks to number 5 in predicted manufacturing competitiveness. So for this, we have to focus our attention on development of our infrastructure. And the major challenge that Indian manufacturing faces is low power availability. So due to low power availability, there is decrease in productivity and efficiency, and it also lowers our output rate. So how can we improve our infrastructure?
That is a very interesting question that you ask again. We've been talking about low power availability for a long time, but if you look at the numbers, today India has more than enough generating capacity to meet all of its demand. The problem is not so much the lack of infrastructure, but how efficiently we are distributing the power and how efficiently we are utilizing the power. So in a way, the infrastructure gap is a gap again in policy, not so much in goods. That is the case in power, but the situation in the case of transport is slightly different. Railways, which tends to be the main carrier of heavy goods over large distances across the world, it's very poorly managed and run in India. It's very unreliable, and the result is that most of the traffic actually moves on the roads. That places an enormous burden on our road infrastructure. Now, our road infrastructure is not that bad, but it's crumbling under the pressure. And where we really lack and we have a lot to make up is on rural roads. How will you get the rural roads to get growth going unless you can connect them to markets? And how will you connect them unless you build the roads? So that's where I think a lot of effort has to be focused on. It's not an impossible task. Luckily, we have such a big gap that it's both a problem but also an opportunity, because it gives you an opportunity to leapfrog. If you look at the 1990s, when I was growing up, waiting for a telephone line took almost years to get a telephone line. And people all over the world said, India is never going to be able to do it because there's such a huge backlog. Well, suddenly here comes mobile telephony, and suddenly everybody has a telephone. Lack of telecommunications is not a problem anymore. So we have an opportunity to leapfrog. And we also have a very vibrant private sector, which is ready to invest, and a very vibrant financial sector, which is willing to provide the private sector to the resources to invest. So I think it's not an impossible gap to bridge. Thanks.
So we have seen that the government has established various economic zones for the manufacturing of commodities product-wise and built the required ecosystem. So, however, is this enough on the government's part? And if not, what else can we do?
I think, when you build infrastructure, building it around dedicated economic zones may be an option in the short run. In the long term, if you want to maintain growth, you want to get poverty reduction, you want to give jobs to people, there is no option but to provide the same infrastructure across the whole country. So as I said, that is the need of the hour. It's not impossible. It's a difficult job, but it can be done. I think what the government needs to do is more actively work with the private sector. The private sector has not just the resources, but also the management know-how and technique to somehow implement many of these infrastructure projects very efficiently. We have pension funds which are willing to invest long-term into supporting infrastructure. So we have to build on these strengths that we already have and deliver a better infrastructure for all of India, not just around special economic zones. Thanks.
So, Mr. Narayan, now that we have discussed low power availability and economic zones in India, let's move on to another major problem faced by India, which is its transportation and huge cost of transportation. So, as we all know, the transportation system in India is very slow and at the same time very costly. It can take a lot of time to deliver products and raw materials from one place to another. So, in your opinion, how can we address this issue of inadequate transportation and its huge cost?
So first, Anushri, I would just like to correct you on one thing. On the huge
Yeah.
cost of transportation, that's probably not true. If you look at the transport costs in India, they are among the lowest in the world. But
Yeah.
probably the problem is that with these low costs, you also get very low quality. Uh, the amount of distance that a typical truck covers in India is among the lowest in the world. I was talking to some people who work in the electronic sector a couple of years back, and they told me that it takes them 11 days to move a container from Shanghai to Bombay, and then it takes them 20 days to move the same container from Bombay to Delhi. So infrastructure is a real problem that's getting India down. And I think, as I mentioned before, the two main things where we have a problem on the transport side are roads and railways. And I think both need to be addressed. It's government is already actively on this program, and the Golden Quadrilateral Program and the National Highway Development Programs have been ongoing for a long time. So those are all very, very welcome steps. Rural connectivity is important. So the Prime Minister's Gram Sadak Yojana is a very good example of how to do things. Ports used to be a problem, but that is slightly getting sorted now because the government has launched the National Maritime Development Program. It has also actively partnered with the private sector. So many of the most efficient and largest ports in India now are in the private sector. And if you've ever traveled on aeroplanes, compare the situation in the 1980s with the situation now. You'll see the huge difference that has already been made in terms of airport connectivity. So we are on the right track. We just need to keep sticking to it. Thanks.
Yeah.
We have seen that micro, small, and medium enterprises contribute to about 7 to 8% of India's GDP, 45% of the manufacturing output, and 40% of our exports. So they are also recognized as the engine of growth for the economy. Now, after agriculture, MSME sector employs the largest number of persons. So the question arises, how can we absorb workers despite bias towards capital-intensive industries?
So first of all, I would just point out that capital intensity does not mean that you cannot absorb workers. It just means that you need a higher rate of growth to absorb the same number of workers. China was able to do this successfully. They had capital intensive industry, but their growth was so massive that they managed to absorb all the workers that they needed to. It's probably true that the same kind of growth rates are not going to be possible for India. So we would need to complement growth with a move towards greater labor intensity. MSMEs are a very powerful and important segment of the economy. Not only do they employ most of the workers, most of the women, and most of the poor people in India. So they're very important for development objectives, but they're also very important for creating a competitive environment. Many of the big companies that we see now have grown from very small roots. Think of Lijjat Papad, for example. So we need to really nurture the MSME sector and make it a vehicle of our growth and development. How do we do that? I think there are a number of things which we have to do right. Most important is to get the enabling environment right. A lot of the regulations, regulatory environment that India has is very restrictive, and it imposes costs on MSMEs that they're not able to very easily handle. So, for example, if you have to hire a lawyer, you hire the same lawyer for a company which employs 50 people, the cost per worker will be much lower. You hire the same lawyer for a company which employs 10 people, the cost will be much more. So we need to reduce the regulatory burden. And that's something that the government of India has actively been doing. The ease of doing business program that is launched is a very critical thing. The other thing that I think is going to be important is that national demand is probably one source, but I think we have to make our SMEs think global. Many of our companies have done really well by being able to export abroad. Think of gems and jewelry; they constitute a large part of what India exports, and most of it comes out of small and medium-sized enterprises. So we need to build on the success stories. We need to create a proper enabling environment. We need to provide MSMEs the right infrastructure, and we need to support them through providing them the right financing, because access to finance is a big issue for MSMEs. If we do that, I'm very confident that the Indian business is so strong and so well placed to do well in the world. And not only will they do well in the world and create growth, but they will also create jobs. Thank you.
Mr. Narayan, you mentioned that we have to nurture MSMEs. So, could you elaborate on how we can protect our industries despite pressure of globalization and liberalization? We are seeing that MSMEs are facing lots of competition from cheap imports. So, can we rectify this by raising our import tariffs?
We have tried that in the past. If you look at what our policy since the 1970s, we have followed a policy of import substitution, which basically meant to keep domestic industry safe behind huge tariff barriers. And if they're protected, then they will grow and they will become strong. That did not really work. What happened was that our companies became complacent. They did not face competition. They did not remain competitive. We had a captive market. So perhaps raising tariff barriers is not the best way to protect MSMEs. My feeling would be that if you really want to support MSMEs, help them with the basics, with having the right environment for them to prosper, giving them access to finance, giving them access to opportunities, and let them be exposed to international competition. A few may die, but many will survive, and the ones that survive will likely become strong and will be competitive and will be able to span across the globe. So I am personally not in favor of tariff barriers. This might be an option very much in the short run when you have a big emergency, but in the long term, it is much better to let companies be competitive and look outwards. Thank you.
So now that we have discussed infrastructure and MSMEs, now let's go on to bigger problems that India might face. So current geoeconomic challenges that might affect India's manufacturing sector is trade war. So, for example, the US-Iran tensions negatively impacted India's manufacturing sector. India is the world's third biggest oil consumer. It meets 80% of its crude oil requirements through imports. However, with the ending of exemptions by US, India was not able to import crude oil from Iran, which was its third largest supplier after Iraq and Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, the US-China trade war can positively impact India. Looking at products on which China and US have imposed tariffs on, India has captured a major share in textile imports of US, which have shifted from China towards other South Asian countries. However, the bank has said that even though India has grabbed major share in the first 5 months of 2019, other countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh have witnessed increase in exports to China. So, as we all know, India being a developing country, if at all exposed to trade war, in fact, it has been exposed to trade war, how will it protect its economy on international front?
So I guess by trade war, you mean when one country does something, either impose tariffs or does other kind of barriers to trading with other countries.
Yes.
Well, we live in a world which is the way it is, and trade wars have unfortunately become a way of life. We tried very hard through much of the 1990s to build a multilateral trading system, which was rules-based and was aimed explicitly at preventing the kind of wars that we're having today. But that I think still remains, but it's under threat, and I think we really need to continue building that up. But beyond that, how do we protect ourselves and how do we take advantage? I think the answer to both is the same. The only way you can protect, it's like building your immunity. If you want to protect yourself against COVID, the best way to do it is by building your immunity. The same thing applies to economies. The best way to protect yourself against trade war is by building an economy which is so competitive, so strong, that it will be able to withstand any trade war. And again, I mean, are we there yet? I think the point that you raised is a very good one, which is on how has India been able to benefit? I mean, from the trade war between India and China, between the US and China. That trade war has led to a decline in exports from China, and many countries, particularly Vietnam and Bangladesh, have gained from it. A lot of countries have seen huge amount of foreign direct investment coming into them, particularly countries like Malaysia, Thailand. India has gained, but not significantly. And I think the answer goes back to the same thing. We are not ready. We don't have the base to be able to take advantage of the opportunities that are offered to us. When we became independent in 1950, we were thought of as a country which would be the next big star. We would hit it big, we would have huge growth rates, we would be able to generate growth not just for ourselves, but for the world. Those opportunities never happened. And I think it's the same thing. Unless we get our economy right, by getting our policies right, by getting our infrastructure right, we will not be in an position to either take advantage of trade wars or to resist one, should one be forced down our throat. Thanks.
Mr. Narayan, you have mentioned that Vietnam and Bangladesh have witnessed much larger increase in exports to USA. So how can we increase our exports? Should we go for only those industries for which we have the raw material? And what steps can we take for the removal of export duties to make our products cost effective, as well as steps to be taken for reduction and removal of import duties by the destination country?
So on your first question, do we need to import or export products that we have raw materials for? If you look back in the 1950s, and this is a very interesting case study, and I would encourage you to read it. Look at Japan. Japan became a major player in the steel industry and produced a lot of steel through much of the 1950s and 60s. And this was despite the fact that it had neither iron ore nor coal. It had to depend on imported resources for both. Similarly, one of the major exports from India is now petroleum products. Petrol is not something that we have enough of. We import most of it, as Anushri mentioned in her last question. But yet we are able to do very successfully on that front. But then contrast that with the case of garments. We have cotton, we have cheap labor, yet even a country like Bangladesh exports more garments than India does. So in this complex world that we live in, highly integrated, trade-driven world, I think raw materials is no longer a determinant of comparative advantage. What you have to find is that thing that you can do well and really do it well. And once you're able to find that niche, then you're in a very good spot. So what you need to do, I think hiding behind tariff barriers, saying, oh, we don't want to import from a particular country, we don't want to export unless we have a fair base. This is not likely to get you anywhere. I think what we really need is to build up our global firms, make them globally competitive, let them out into the world and drive our growth. And for that, I think we need a very, very strong partnership between the government and the private sector. If you look at countries which have done well, the government has been in very close partnership with the private sector. They both work together as partners in pushing the national interests. And that, I think, is something that we should also aspire to do. There should be very close dialogue between government and private sector. The government should listen to the private sector and provide what the private sector needs and what the government alone is in a position to provide. But then, on the other hand, the private sector needs to also work with the government to help government push its interests abroad. How do we ensure that governments can create opportunities for our private sector? The multilateral trading system already does that. You negotiate with everyone, get everybody to reduce your tariff barriers. You negotiate free trade agreements with countries that you have specific interests in. India has huge interest in the service sector. We want to be able to export more IT related material. We want to export more of our financial sector because our financial sector is so strong. the government can do that by negotiating with other countries. So this is the way that I think that we will be able to promote export-led growth in India. Thank you.
Mr. Narayan, you just mentioned export growth and India negotiating with other countries. So, is there a contradiction here? Because India is aspiring to become a linchpin in global supply chain, and like we should keep in mind its trade restrictions. So, what do you think?
Again, a very, very interesting and important question. I think there is a fundamental contradiction in trying to be in global value chains and being wary of trade. Global value chains are based on trade and investment. You cannot be wary of trade and still aim to be a partner in global value chains. And I think a very important decision in this regard was, I don't know if you have heard of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the RECP. It's the largest trade agreement that is currently being negotiated. It would bring in most of the countries under ASEAN, but also some of the larger countries like Australia, Japan. India was offered a partnership by ASEAN. It was offered a position to be an RCEP. And if this was basically an invitation for India to join the global value chains that crisscross ASEAN, because this is the best way to do it. But India has provisionally decided not to go ahead with the RCEP agreement for now. And that has sent a very negative signal to the markets. And I think the fear, and at the same time, India is also renegotiating many of the investment treaties that it signed with countries around the world. In this world of global value chains, trade and investment are two sides of the same coin. And when you take these kind of steps, the message that gets sent out to international investors and to international traders is very negative. So I think that is something that India needs to be wary of, the image that it's projecting. I think at the base, the government of India is very open-minded. They do think of international trade as a valuable opportunity for getting growth to India. But at the same time, you have to balance that somehow with your inherent need to protect domestic industry. And again, I think that contradiction is something that India needs to juggle and to manage if it has to become a big partner in global value chains. Thank you.
So right now we are following a policy of Atmanirbhar Bharat, and it has twin objectives of both reviving different spheres of the economy in the short term and insulating India from any global economic downturn. So in the long run. So the Abhiyan, it seeks to build capacities across sectors and promote local products. So by Atmanirbhar Bharat, we can reduce dependence for imports of raw material from China. So what steps can we take to expedite this, and will stopping imports from China hurt India's economy?
So first of all, I would like to say that the aim of the what was it? I forgot what was the policy you mentioned?
Atmanirbhar Abhiyan. Atmanirbhar Bharat.
So Atmanirbhar Abhiyan, I think is a policy objective is great. There is nothing wrong with promoting domestic industry. There is nothing wrong with creating the right incentives for them to become grow and to become stronger. And I mean, the idea that the government of India has to build capacities as a way of doing this is the right strategy. Does this necessarily mean that we should be isolating ourselves from the world? Think of it like this. If you want to, say, for example, you want to make pani puri and you want to sell it, would you negotiate and get the best deal for atta, or would you want to buy it from someone in your colony, which may be more expensive because you want to support them? That is a good objective if you want to support someone, but the output will be that your golgappas will be more expensive. So I think in the same way, if you try to restrict trade, and if you think that there is somehow something wrong in buying raw materials if somebody is producing them and giving them to you cheaper, I think that is a wrong kind of thinking. We do need to buy raw materials from the cheapest source, There may be other considerations. Maybe we want to support a local industry. That's fine. We should do that. Maybe in a calibrated manner. But I think using this as a way of turning away from international markets, I think that strategy has not worked well for India in the past. It worked well when India opened up in the 1990s. But if we go back, it may again be a policy that may not work so good for India. Thanks.
Mr. Narayan, we have seen that Vietnam has emerged as a strong contender to grab a major share in the post-COVID-19 world. Vietnam has worked very hard at courting foreign countries and giving manufacturers access to ASEAN Free Trade Area and preferential trade pacts with countries throughout Asia, European Union, and USA. So, what measures can India take to beat these small countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh to grab a major share of flight of business from China?
I think you're absolutely right. Vietnam is doing a fantastic job. And just a fact that I would like to mention, if you look at the trade to GDP ratio, which measures how open you are, the trade to GDP ratio of Vietnam is more than 200%. It exports more than the country produces for its own consumption. So it's an incredible story. And all of this has happened in the last 10 to 15 years. So I think the positive message that I take out of the Vietnam story is that it's not difficult and it's possible and it can be done in the short run. Should we really be worried about beating Bangladesh and Vietnam? These are small countries. The pool of labor is much smaller. India is a much larger country. The opportunities that it has are also very different and much larger. So I think we should really, rather than trying to beat someone, we should focus on pulling ourselves up. The problems that India faces are not problems that are outside India's borders. The problems that India faces are mostly inside its borders. We are not doing well because of our inabilities to be competitive and to sell to the world what the world needs. It's not because the world doesn't want what we want us to do better. So I think we really need to get our act together. And I think, as I mentioned again, this is a combination of getting your policies right, getting your infrastructure right, and working in a close partnership with the private sector and the public sector. We have seen so many of our companies doing so well. Many of our companies have grown globally. They've expanded not just in the region, they've even gone so far as to Africa. Our companies are exporting to Europe and to America. They're creating new markets in Singapore and even other countries in ASEAN. There is nothing fundamentally wrong with what we are doing. We just need to do more of it. And if we do more and do it better, I think there is nothing that can prevent India from becoming a very successful country like China. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Narayan, you just mentioned that India should not focus on beating smaller countries like Vietnam or Bangladesh, but focus on its own policies. So are you trying to say that India should so are you trying to talk about the self-reliance policy? So are you trying to say that India should focus on being self-reliant?
No, I'm saying exactly the opposite, that India should integrate with the world economy. This is not an area where self-reliance is something that will give you the kind of growth opportunities that you need. We have so many millions and millions of workers joining the labor force every month. If by self-reliance, do you think that we will be able to create the jobs that we need? No, we need to sell abroad. We need to integrate with the world economy. We need to be more open to the world economy, not just in trade by buying goods from what the world offers to us cheaply and selling what we can offer the world cheaper, but also by opening up to foreign direct investment. Again, I go back to the story of China and to the story of Vietnam. What have China and Vietnam done so well? These countries realized very early on that what they lacked was technology and what they lacked was capital. And then they went out of their way to integrate with the world economy and get things that they needed. India also needs to realize what is it that it really needs, what its strengths are and what its weaknesses are, and then build on its strengths and look to the support of other countries to protect it from its weaknesses. So I think, quite apart from self-reliance, I am actually saying that India needs to integrate much, much stronger with the world economy than it has done so. There is nothing to fear. I think, as somebody said, Winston Churchill, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. India has a huge number of very competitive firms. We have a very vibrant private sector. We have now a very supportive government. What do we really need to fear? If we were to open ourselves, I think we would be able to do very, very well in this world. Thank you.
So basically, you're trying to say that India should focus on its needs and at the same time collaborate with the world.
Correct.
Collaborate with
I
other
think
countries.
it needs to actively work with other countries to create opportunities for itself, and it needs to work actively with other countries to fill the weaknesses that it has. We may not have all the raw material that we need, but just like Japan, we can import those. And then if we are able to do something well, we will be able to export very successfully. We don't need to be self-reliant. We don't need to produce everything. And that's the basic theory of trade. If we could all be self-reliant, and if we, what did Adam Smith say? I mean, he said that if you specialize and then you trade, the world as a whole will be much better off than if you try doing everything yourself, because you can never be equally good at everything. So in the same way, India can never be equally good at everything. It can be good at everything, but not equally good. So what should it do? It should use the world economy to specialize in what it does best and let the world do what it does best. And by doing this jointly, we would be able to create opportunities for ourselves as well as for the world. Thank you.
Okay, a very good thought. So, on behalf of my school, I really extend a hearty vote of thanks to our guest speaker, Mr. Ashish Narayan. He took out time from his busiest schedule and graced this occasion.
Today, we have had the opportunity to hear your views, which have enlightened our minds and have shown us a new path. My gratitude to all the speakers for gracing the occasion and sharing their opinions today.
From my side also, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. It's always a pleasure to speak to young minds and to hopefully to tell you the way I'm thinking and maybe even inspire you to think great thoughts for India. Thank you.
Yeah, we would also like to thank our teachers who have been instrumental in conducting this interaction session. I would also like to thank my team members and fellow students for their valuable inputs in this discussion.
We come to the conclusion that while we are seeing an opportunity to make inroads in the manufacturing sector, which will help us to increase our global share, yet the task is full of challenges. We hope with the right directives, political will and focus, India will become a major stakeholder in the global manufacturing space. Thank you, Mr. Ashish Narayan, for meeting with us today and expressing your views on the subject. Also, we would like to thank our teachers for helping us conduct the interview.